Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I want to say thank you to Social Media Cowboys for sponsoring this week's episode of the Confidence Through Health podcast. If you need help with a website, if you need social media needs for your business, if you need help with AdWords, SEO, all those things that you know you should be doing, but you are too busy to do or you're too confused about, they are the experts that you need in your corner. If you're interested in launching a podcast, such as mine, they help me edit my podcast and do a fantastic job making sure that all of the technical side of it is handled and we launch a nice, neat, edited podcast episode each week. So I want to thank Social Media Cowboys for their continued sponsorship of the Confidence Through Health podcast. You can find them at socialmediacowboys.com, or you can find them as well with other sponsors at confidencethroughhealth.com. Well, Grant and Janelle, I want to thank you all for being guests on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here, Jerry.
And so one of the things we were talking about before you jumped on is, that y'all work for Viome, and it's a company that I've followed quite a bit in what y'all are doing as far as both the testing side of what's going on inside the body, but also how to, we found out what the results are. What do we do with that, right? How do we change so that we get the outcomes we want, whether it's more of an immediate thing, but definitely down the line, years down the road, so that we can become healthier. What got the two of you involved in wanting to see, these are the changes that I think are important and need to be made?
Yeah, I'll share my background a little bit. I'm a registered dietitian, and I started my career in the health and wellness space kind of from the get-go. I did a lot of coaching early on, and you probably know, as you interact with people, they have very different experiences and different things work for different people. And you see that when you're coaching one-on-one, or maybe when you're interacting as a physician with someone one-on-one. So from there, I kind of jumped into the personalized nutrition space. I worked for a company where we looked at genetic SNPs, so looking at those genetic variants and how that might impact the way you respond to diet. And then eventually made the jump over to Viome, where we get a much clearer picture because we're looking not only at the human gene expression, but also the expression of your microbes and what they're doing, how that's impacting your health. So it's been really fun to see. I think over the past decade, for sure, we're seeing a bigger push towards personalization in general. And people are really starting to understand and get in tune with their body and learn that, hey, what worked for my neighbor, it didn't work for me. And that's not my fault, right? It's not that I didn't try hard enough, but I need something different for my body.
Yeah.
Yeah, very similar story from me. My name is Grant Antoine. I'm a naturopathic physician. My training was in integrative primary care. All that means is I learned everything you do from a traditional med school for primary care, family medicine, but now we have more tools in our toolkits, right? We learn mental health, we learn nutrition, supplementation, physical medicine. And really, while we can use pharmaceuticals, we try not to, right? So really, it's all about that lifestyle and behavioral modification. How can we give the tools, the education, the things you need? In that training, you get a lot of complex chronic disease that walks through the door. And in those cases, you got to start with the gut. That was hammered into me during my training, right? And it's because the gut and the gut microbiome are so influential for our nervous system, obviously our digestive system, but cardiovascular health, immune health, right? Especially autoimmunity, blood sugar control, and really, it's the key to personalization, as Janelle was alluding to. When we think about even just diets and foods, how we respond as individuals, medications as well. Why didn't that cancer therapy work? Why doesn't that metformin work for me? There's these outliers, and it's, in pharmacology, we talk a lot about first pass metabolism of medications, right? Meaning that medications that we take orally, they go into the gut. They had to go through the liver before they actually make their way into circulation. But even before they get to the liver, they have to be filtered through the microbiome. And those changes, that information is important. It affects us, our physiology, how we express our genes. And so when I had the opportunity to jump on with Viome, who's really with the metatranscriptomic technology that we have, creating novel insights that we really didn't have um, those opportunities before to zoom in without looking at that gene expression of these microbes. What are these microbes doing, right? Let's stop looking at composition and look at the activity. So I jumped at that opportunity and been with Viome the last 5 years.
So is that the way you describe that, which I totally understand, but I know a lot of listeners might not because they haven't been researching and doing all this stuff. But because we all have a different kinds and different amounts of microbes in our gut, right? And so like that's where if somebody says, "Oh, if you just eat these foods, you're going to be fine, and you'll lose weight, or you'll get healthier, or your blood pressure will go down, or whatever," and that doesn't happen for that person, it's not because the food necessarily, it's because of the interaction at the microbe level, right?
Yeah. And the way I like to think about it sometimes is, um, they've done like studies before where they take humans, they put them in different environments, and then they act differently, right?
Yeah.
Our microbes are kind of similar. They can do helpful things for us, they can also do harmful things for us. And so, like Grant was saying, it's not so much about the composition, but let's look at what they're actually doing in the environment that they're in. Because we want those microbes to be in a healthy environment, low inflammation. So they're producing things that are then going to benefit us versus, taking that same food and producing maybe something that's toxic or inflammatory for our body.
Right.
And so that's where, looking at the function of those microbes, we can start to see, hey, are our microbes behaving in the way that we want? And can we make changes within our food? And we're talking about, all healthy whole foods, but maybe for me, some of those whole foods are actually turning into something unwanted, as opposed to for you or for Grant, right?
That's right.
Right.
And then how many times have you been told to go eat fiber? You try to eat that fiber and you just blow up. Like you're uncomfortable. You're gassy, you're bloated. Like, hey, same thing, cruciferous vegetables, sulfite gas. Your microbiome in that activity definitely plays a role in how we respond.
Right. And so for couples out there, right, that like, I mean, my wife says this all the time, like that and of course I'm an athlete and I exercise and all that, like there's that piece of what I do, but she's like, you can look at healthy food and lose weight, and I look at it, like and that doesn't happen to me, right?
Yeah.
And I get that, like obviously there's a male and female piece to that, but there's also that, obviously our microbiomes are completely different, based on not just our genetic makeup, but where our backgrounds come from and how things have just been passed down. Correct?
Yeah, definitely. And it's actually interesting that, some people's microbes can extract more calories from the food than other people, right? So you're actually like absorbing more calories than someone else might be. But I think the bigger picture, especially when it comes to like our weight management and male versus female, is a story of blood sugar and hormones. And our microbiome plays really a central role in that and how we respond to foods that we eat. So like our microbes, for some people, a banana is going to spike their blood sugar way up,
Right.
maybe give them a crash later. For others, they're going to just get a nice little curve from that. And when we get those big spikes and those crashes, that not only influences our appetite, but it's going to, shoot out insulin. It's going to cause out weight gain. We're going to see all of those downstream effects. And it really starts with the microbes and what they're doing with that food from the get-go.
Yeah. So is this something that, as a registered dietitian, as a physician, like I'm going to say this. I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm going to say that I think a lot of people in your positions are not as tuned into, oh, wait, we got to start here. Right. It may be like, oh, you just eat these foods, or like you alluded to, Grant, like, okay, let's do some pharmaceuticals and like, let's mix some things in there before going, wait, do we have an issue with the gut first? Is that a fair statement that like a
Yeah,
lot of people are not
yeah.
tuned into that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And true, conventional training, med school is really good because you learn a lot of the subspecialties right all at once. But
Mhm.
as you specialize further and further through residency and fellowships, and you actually make it into clinical practice, you really end up with this very narrow lens of what you're focused on for your patients, right? And this is
Right.
just what healthcare is. And there's advantages and strengths to that, right?
Yeah.
Because you want an expert. If you need help with, you want a heart surgery, you want an expert at heart surgery,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
Going under the knife. So, but at the same time, we lose some of that like that comprehensiveness, like that integrated approach, the
Mhm.
systems biology approach, where you take these complex systems that we can't simplify, right? And we, in science especially, we try to reduce in this reductionist approach to, hey, help me understand these mechanisms and these concepts. But
Yeah.
just because you're zoomed in on one biochemical pathway, it's occurring in a cell with hundreds and thousands of other biochemical reactions at the same time next to other cells, tissues, right? And so it's a lot of complexity there. And I think that's why, while more and more providers have recognized how important the microbiome and gut health is, they don't quite know how to decipher it yet. And right. And because there is so much data, we haven't had the tools to analyze that. Now with machine learning, AI, all these
Mhm.
computational tools we have, we can start to dig into these mechanisms of action. But we've really been stuck on composition for such a long time. And all that means, going in like you described, hey, what are the good microbes? What are the bad microbes? What are the relative compositions? Um, but that's largely failed, right? And really stalled the science because
Mhm.
you can use composition as a proxy, right? And see this association. Oh, well, based off this composition, I expect obesity, or, someone with type 2 diabetes, I expect to see this particular composition. And we see those trends,
Yeah.
but there's nothing really actionable at that point outside of, hey, eat more fiber,
Right.
right? Eat more
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables, which we already kind of know.
Yeah.
But what it turns out, going back to the activity, it's an activity that's very matters. That's the love language between the microbes and our body, our cells, right?
Yeah.
Are those molecules. And so if you think of the microbiome as this individual metabolic factory that we all have in our guts, how can we leverage that little factory to our advantage? And it's pulling in substrates to improve beneficial pathways. It's pulling back on other foods and substrates
Yeah.
to decrease the harmful pathways, maybe. So how can we fine tune that system to support our greater health?
Right. Um, well, and so that's where testing obviously comes in, right? Like, because you can guesstimate and I would assume that you could even like eat really, really healthy for a week and feel great, but probably not be 100% tuned into like, oh, this is what my microbes really want. You're just feeling great because you changed your nutrition from stuff that was really poor to really great. And so of course you're going to feel great.
Yeah, and there's
Right.
always there's always a foundation, and I often say, like, when people maybe jump into fad diets,
Hmm.
um, they often do feel good at the beginning of it, and that's because we're cleaning out processed foods. We're usually
Right.
cutting back on sugars. We usually are increasing vegetables, and all of those are foundational and beneficial. But those benefits tend to peter out
Yeah.
eventually because we're not, like you were saying, in tune with what our body really needs. And that's where testing becomes really helpful to say, hey, let's take it to the next level. And instead of doing this guesswork and trying what your neighbor tried or what your husband tried, let's see what's going to work for your body and which
Yeah.
foods are maybe causing a more inflammatory response for you versus someone else. And so just getting that data puts you like one step ahead and takes you out of the guessing game.
Yeah. Because I've heard this about like gluten for people that have a gluten sensitivity. If you have exposure to it, it can set you back for weeks as far as like the symptoms and effects that you feel. Um, is that similar for like other foods that maybe you're not, your microbes don't necessarily like, they could be healthy, but if you're eating them because quote they're healthy and some influencer said you need to have, 30 grams of this. Like, but if your microbes are not quite liking that, like you're still going to have some negative effects from that that's just going to linger and cause you confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little different because when we're talking about gluten sensitivities or food sensitivities, food allergies, right? Those are primarily immune mediated reactions to where
Right.
a food gluten's coming through, my immune system sees it, and now I have an immune reaction to that food.
Right.
Certainly, microbes influence. They really train our immune system early on, and this is why we see increasing rates of eczema, asthma, right? These atopic disorders that we see in children, because we've moved, based off hygiene theory to this idea like, oh no, we got to kill them all, like antibiotic,
Right.
and you get a cough and cold. Hey, where's the antibiotic? Well, was it viral? Did you need to wait, 3 to 5 days and let it, maybe it resolved on its own? But we
Yeah.
are a little hyper reactive, or have been traditionally, and we're trying to pull back on that medically, in the healthcare system. But those microbes help us train how we respond to those foods, and they truly help us educate. Hey, this is self versus non-self. This is friend. This is foe. And it's really important for our development. That said, when these other foods come through, and yeah, maybe less of a strong immune reaction to the foods based on how the the microbes metabolize the food, but you can still have immune activation, inflammatory pathways, these inflammatory cascades, disrupted signaling that again will have impacts on our nervous system and our immune system, cardiovascular system, the liver, I mentioned. So yeah, it's pretty profound what these microbes, the impact they can have on our health, and I think it's really important, and I just so fascinating because it's really outside of the brain and unlocking neurocognitive health and dementia, Alzheimer's, all this. For me, the microbiome and the brain are the kind of the last frontiers when it comes to the human body.
Yeah. But what is really positive though is while you're saying, as someone with like a gluten allergy or sensitivity might really suffer for weeks after being exposed, um, the microbiome can change, right? We have the power to make changes to the way it's functioning. And I mean, we even see fluctuations from day to day in the microbiome, but particularly, for really working on a microbiome friendly diet over 3 months, you can see a lot of positive benefits within that window of time. So, so there's good news there in that, if you slip up and maybe you eat one thing wrong, you have a piece of cake on Thanksgiving, or a piece of pie, whatever it might be.
Two
Like,
pieces.
yeah,
I got to get the pumpkin and the coconut cream.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Circle back in the next day, and your microbes are going to continue to adjust and evolve, and it's not the end of the world.
Right. Well, and so when it comes to taking that like heavy dose of antibiotic, right? But whether it was truly a bacteria issue or as a viral issue, but you get prescribed this, and you can't survive. You're down and out. You're like, I got to do something. You're killing off like all bacteria, all microbes, right? Like you're just like the good stuff and the bad stuff. You're just like it's annihilating everything. So starting from there, I would imagine it's a lot like, okay, well, I haven't done that, but I know my gut microbiome's off, and I'm trying to adjust it and make it more in a beneficial and positive way. Is that where things like probiotics and prebiotics come into play?
Yeah, definitely. So if you do need to take an antibiotic, and there's reasons to take them, right?
Sure.
They're there for a reason.
Yep.
We want to support the gut microbiome during and after that. And probiotics is a really essential way to do that. Let's reintroduce healthy bacteria into the gut. But having those fibers is really essential. And so sometimes after an antibiotic, it takes a little bit of time for you to get used to eating fiber again. So start slowly, and start building it up over a week or two. But those prebiotic fibers feed your microbes, and that's going to help them flourish. It's what's going to help them produce those beneficial compounds for our bodies. So that's, in my mind, that's kind of the key that unlocks it all, is making sure we're getting those in.
Yeah. Because they for them to proliferate, they've got to be able to feed off of something, right?
Yeah.
And so it is just that fibrous material.
If there's not fiber around, they will feed off of other things, right? If proteins, if amino acids make it down there, they'll use those if there's not enough fiber. But that typically results in other things being produced, toxins and ammonias and things like that, that are not as healthy for our gut lining.
Right.
That's right. You can think of non-fibrous foods, amino acids, as kind of junk food for microbes. Yeah, they can live on it, but the end result is, kind of like garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing for microbes. They're feeding on these amino acids. They can survive on them. It's not their preferential fuel source, right? It's not the healthiest option for them, but they need to survive. And so they can. But what we see often actually is a lot of the unfavorable metabolites that come out of the microbiome are metabolites of protein and amino acids, right? And a lot of that can be reversed by bringing in complex carbohydrates, fibers, polyphenols, right? All these foods that we think of as prebiotic. That's if you want happy, healthy microbes, you need to give them a happy, healthy diet, and that has positive benefits for us as a human.
So is the gut microbiome what role does it play in like that initiating, hey, I'm hungry, I need something, right? Does it play a role in that, like or is it more just I'm empty, I've used up all my energy and I need something? But what's sort of directing that from a gut microbiome standpoint?
Yeah, if I'll jump in, we already mentioned blood sugar. So the microbiome going to have a tremendous impact on controlling blood sugar and blood fats, right? And both of those things can influence, hunger and satiety signals. When we start thinking about satiety and those signals and GLP-1s, all the rage these days, POI, leptin, ghrelin, CKK. There's a whole list of characters and hormones that have short-term effects, long-term effects. But the cells that line the gut are monitoring the foods that are coming in. Proteins, fatty acids, carbohydrates, and even short-chain fatty acids, which we don't produce ourselves. We rely on those microbes. And so when we're talking about feeding those microbes the fibers, when they ferment those fibers, they produce things like butyrate, propionate, acetate that we can't. And those provide anti-inflammatory signals and actually affect our gene expression on how we control blood sugar in the liver. And they release these hormones from those enteroendocrine cells, right? Those little specialized cells that are monitoring. Those are the cells that actually secrete these satiety hormones and provide those signals like, oh, hey, you've had enough. Let's slow down.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that our natural GLP-1 is produced in the gut, right? So those we eat certain foods that then we can produce those short chain fatty acids from the microbes, and that's going to signal and say, hey, let's release GLP-1, and that will then cause a cascade of events, slowing down your motility. You feel full longer because that food's not moving through quite as fast. It's going to send signals up to the brain to say, hey, I'm full. So we get a lot of benefit from that, and taking care of the gut is essential to be able to have that regulation in our natural GLP-1.
Right. So when we're skipping all the fibrous materials, we're harming our gut in more than one way, really.
Certainly. Yeah. Absolutely.
So with the testing, and we were able to figure out, like, okay, these are the types of foods. Does that change as the microbiome changes, or are we always with those foods? Like, does that diet change as we age and we need different nutrients and things?
Yeah, it changes over time, just like we do. So, I had baby about a year ago. He just turned 1.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
gone through the postpartum. I just
Yep.
retested myself because I've been through changes physically,
Mhm.
right? So I want to see,
Sure.
hey, what's going on with my body now? We go through different phases in life, whether we're training for athletic events, we're going through menopause, we've had surgery, we've taken antibiotics. All
Mhm.
of those types of things can impact our microbiome, and as well as the normal sleep, stress, diet. Of course, those
Yeah.
are going to play a role. But we're just going to have different needs at different points in our life. And so that's where it's important to keep checking in with
Yeah.
yourself, right? Just like we go into our doctor and we get our blood sugar and our cholesterol checked every year. We want to keep checking in on our microbiome. And so
Yeah.
we usually encourage people to retest about every 6 months, or at a cadence that works for them.
Yeah.
And as they do, then we can adjust recommendations for their diet to say, hey, what's happening at this moment? And what foods are going to best support you moving forward. And some of it's just that, those little bit of tweaks.
Mhm.
You're going to try some things. We're going to improve some of the functions of the microbes and then say, hey, we see an area that needs a little bit more support, and let's bump it up here with maybe certain polyphenols in the diet,
Right.
berries and things like that. Or maybe we need to supplement with something as well to support it. So
Yeah.
it's going to evolve.
Yeah, and now, like we mentioned earlier, hey, eat more fiber. But hey, doc, I eat that fiber. I feel like crap, right? I
Yeah.
bloat. Now we can pick and choose. Well, hey, you're less likely to produce a bunch of methane gas with this particular fiber, but I can give you this other prebiotic fiber that won't have those effects, but you still get the benefits, right? So now you can
Right.
start to fine tune. Oh, hey, I need these polyphenols, but I this particular food has this other substrate that's bad for me. Okay, well, let's
Mhm.
pivot. Let's look at these other foods that we can now emphasize. So we'll pull back on the one, emphasize the other. And in this way, you're personalizing the diet to make it optimal for you and your outcomes, whatever goals that you're pursuing.
Right. And that's the beautiful thing about the foods that we get from fruits and vegetables is that there's so many different options to get similar vitamins and minerals and fibrous material and all that, right? It's like you don't just have to be like, hey, if you can't have blueberries, sorry, you're just going to miss out on
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
all these
What? No,
benefits.
no way.
No.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah. Um, and so I've followed a lot recently, and then I've had some of my clients do some fasting to help like reset their body, reset everything. Um, how does that affect the gut microbiome when we just stop introducing everything altogether?
Yeah. Let me take this second.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So obviously those microbes are there because we provide them a constant source
Mhm.
of food and fuel, right?
Yeah.
That's why they're residing in our guts. And then we provide them with our diet, and then they provide us with, hopefully beneficial metabolites and those
Right.
signals that we're talking about.
Right.
We pull back on that diet. Now they don't have that energy coming in, and so you see decreases in composition, diversity, right,
Mhm.
richness. So the number of microbes that are populating the gut. So you see
Right.
a drop in these numbers, which is temporary, right?
Sure.
Just while you're fasting and until you can reintroduce the diet. But it's and I hate to use the word reset because there's some bias that comes with that. But in a way, you are resetting the gut, allowing things to maybe calm down depending on that activity that's occurring.
Right.
And the cool thing about fasting, um, a lot of the microbes that can survive when we don't have that constant energy
Mhm.
coming in, they can survive on the mucus in our gut, right? So our
Mm.
cells, our gut, you have your gut lining, and everyone,
Right.
you hear about leaky gut. So you want a nice, healthy gut lining. And one of the defense barriers mechanisms we have is this mucin layer that protects the endothelial cells that line the gut. That
Yeah.
mucin layer, microbes live in that mucin layer, and they can feed actually and ferment that mucin and live off of it. Not all microbes can,
Sure.
but it turns out that those guys that can, and Akkermansia, which has been all the rage recently, can, right?
Mhm.
And so what you see though is typically these microbes that can live off that mucin layer can also produce lots of butyrate, and they produce lots of
Mm.
signals for both our gut lining health because they want us to produce more of that mucin,
Sure.
So they're sending the metabolites to us. So I was like, hey, buddy, yeah, keep that mucin coming.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of downstream benefits that we receive because of that. So fasting, you'll actually see, even though the overall diversity and richness is decreasing,
Mhm.
some of these numbers in those beneficial commensals that we see in the mucin layer actually will go up. So if you're looking for a way to temporarily boost maybe your Akkermansia levels, and fasting is a tool to do that. Not to say there aren't other risks and benefits with fasting that you
Sure.
want to
Absolutely.
know, and especially as an athlete, you want to be looking at
Yep.
your protein intakes and your muscle mass and all these other things. But
Right.
definitely a tool in our toolbox when we're thinking
Yeah.
about metabolic health and gut health.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, what you reintroduce to come off of a fast is important because you're
There you
trying
go.
to rebuild everything back up, and you want to do it the right way as opposed to just like, hey, let's go have some Skittles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. At a week-long water fast. Now let's go to Burger King.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. So with the testing, with and I th- there's dozens of different microbes, right? Like, and everybody can have a different mixture of all of them, even on the positive microbes, like, right? Just it's not just a matter of like, and I hear this from people that ask me like, oh, what bacteria strain should I take from a prebiotic? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you. I have no idea, like,
Yeah,
because it's so individualized, right?
it is. So there's hundreds of microbes, and some of them can perform similar functions.
Mhm.
But like Grant was talking about before, we've really moved away from looking at the composition. While
Mhm.
we will show our customers the list of microbes that we detect in their gut,
Mhm.
we focus on what are those microbes doing, because that's
Right.
going to give us a better picture of what's happening in terms of like taking the probiotic. When you're saying, hey, what microbe do I take now? What probiotic is going to be beneficial for me? Um, we can look at the literature and say, hey, there's been lots of studies that are going to look at probiotics, their effect on anxiety, on depression, on
Mhm.
weight management, on a whole host of different things. And we can connect that, or even activities within the gut, right? What microbes produce different beneficial metabolites for us. And because we see the function of your gut, we can say, hey, these are the microbes that are going to be most beneficial for you right
Right.
now. Now, having said that, probiotics in general are pretty transient. So that we take them, they pass through, they offer
Mhm.
a benefit, but they don't necessarily colonize. And that's why you need to have kind of that regular cadence of taking them daily to be able to get that benefit
Yeah.
from those probiotics. My husband is a great testament to this, because he in the past had a lot of IBS type symptoms, right? And finding the right probiotic for him has been so crucial. He doesn't have any of his symptoms when he's doing his certain regimen, which
Mhm.
includes a probiotic. And, at different times he's been like, I'm going to see if this is really making a difference. And he'll go off of it.
Right.
And within a week, he's like, oh, yeah, I have to take it. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he notices that regular, you've got to keep it in your system
Right.
to be able to get those benefits.
Right. And that's not necessarily due to anything he did earlier in life or any of that. It's just the way his microbiome developed and his body developed in the environment he was involved in, right?
Yeah, I think I'm sure it's a number of things of our environment. It's we start from birth and we see differences in babies born vaginally versus via
Right.
C-section. So it
Yeah.
starts babies breastfed versus formula fed. It starts really early, what you're exposed to. Your microbiome develops. I think it's like around age 4 that it starts looking like a more mature microbiome.
Mhm.
But then we're exposed to different medications, different
Right.
antibiotics, stress. All of these things can play a role. And IBS is one of those really unique conditions where there's a lot of connection with the brain. So our
Right.
mental health can play a big role in that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't, not one particular thing that probably caused that for him, but a
Sure.
combination of his environment and
Yeah.
lifestyle.
But then we can we can take both things from a nutrition standpoint and add in probiotics or whatever it is, when we see what we've actually got, right? We do a test, we see what we've actually got. We can take things and intermix them to be able to go like, okay, but this is what the conditions are. We can change that and mold that and keep it now into a more normal situation for you.
That's right. That's really the power of our technology, right? Being able to measure the RNA. Because if we can measure that RNA, now I can tell you, and we're the only company in the world that can measure the RNA.
Mhm.
Every other stool diagnostic companies or stool microbiome company, they're zoomed in on DNA. And there's different techniques they can use, and some are better than others, but they're all DNA, right? And that can tell you the master blueprint of all possibilities. And it's really good about identifying those microbes. But then that's about as far as you can take it. Well, if you're using RNA, I can still tell you all the genes and all the DNA that's there. I can still tell you all the microbes that are there, right? So I can tell you everything a DNA test can, but now I know which of those genes are actually being expressed, right? So if a microbe is expressing specific genes, and maybe they're for fiber fermentation, right? Because we've been talking about butyrate and fiber, then we know that they're actively fermenting fibers, right? But if we look at those genes that are being expressed and it's for amino acid metabolism, right? Now we know, well, hey, they're actually, while the genes are there for butyrate production and fiber fermentation, they're not using that. There's not enough, signal for them to be doing that work. There's not enough fiber coming through the diet. They're feeding off these amino acids. And now we can see, oh yeah, well, we know that biochemical pathway. Now we know the enzymes that are involved. We know the cofactors. We know the inputs. We know the outputs. And that's what our team does, come in from a nutritional lens to say, hey, how can we get at that activity, whether it's bringing in, vitamins, minerals, different fiber types, polyphenols. What's the end result of that reaction? Is there an inflammatory cascade? Is there oxidative stress? Is there some fire we need to put out? Is there maybe what can we get downstream? So if there is a negative reaction, we can put that fire out before it, is a wildfire, I guess I'll say, becomes a larger issue. So fine tuning, but really that's the power of the gene expression that we can get at using RNA. And RNA it's a hard molecule to work with. It's expensive. It only represents like 1% of the biological information in any given sample, right?
Wow.
And it turns out, like a lot of these sequencing machines that scientists rely on, the error rate is right at 1%. So if you're at 1% error, but the information you're looking for is below that, like you don't know if you have signal or noise as you're looking for that data. But our science team, brilliant guys in our lab, were able to solve for this. And actually, they developed the technology for the U.S. government at Los Alamos Labs. At the time, we hold all the patents and we have exclusive licensing from the U.S. government. And now we're the world's largest commercial lab and largest RNA biological database. So using that, our systems biology team can now look in, zoom in on RNA, look at this activity and say, hey, in your sample, right, for your test results, where do you land on your gut lining health, on protein fermentation, on inflammatory activity, butyrate production we talked about. We look inside the oral microbiome, can look at those pathways related to gum health, because just like leaky gut, you can have leaky gums and you can have downstream implications from that, which are actually pretty profound. It's one of the advantages, but you gotta test, you gotta know. And then once you have that information, hey, how can we adapt the diet to get the benefit?
And I think we've talked a little bit about these amino acids getting down there, and that's not to say that protein's not important, right?
Sure.
Protein is essentially important to our health, and especially when you're an athlete, making sure you're getting enough protein. So when we see those types of signals saying, hey, your microbes are feeding on these amino acids, they're getting down to the gut, maybe that means adjusting the diet a little bit to have smaller portions throughout the day so that you're digesting it better. But maybe that also means we can support you with things like enzymes, right? So that, especially as we get older, our body has a tougher time producing enough enzymes for our food. And so there's different approaches to look at, hey, we still need that protein, we still want it, but we don't necessarily want it in the gut. So how can we support you in better digestion from the top all the way down?
So from what I'm hearing from your explanation, Grant, is if we're knowing all these things at the root of what's going on in the gut, we can slow down or prevent inflammation. And one of the things I've heard multiple, inflammation is the start of disease at some
It's the
point,
root of all
right?
evil. Yeah.
Right. And so the more we can prevent that, and so then we go, okay, well, how do we prevent it? It's if it's at the gut level, it's in the microbes, and it's watching what gets down there, right? And making sure that we've got the right amounts of what we need there. Um, and when it goes haywire, it how do we put that out as fast as possible?
That's right. And inflammation, it's important, right? So if I was going to just double click on inflammation, then we need inflammatory responses, right?
Sure.
So we roll our ankle or have a sports injury, you need that inflammation to bring in the cells and nutrients to repair and
Right.
recover. You get that infection we talked about, whether it's a cut or a cold. You need that inflammatory immune response, to get all those cells, all on hand and eliminate the threat and heal and move on. But it's when we have this chronic inflammation. And so in those cases, you have an acute response that's reacting to whatever the threat is. And now kind of like you would call 911, all the EMS show up, or they put out the fire, they all go home.
Right.
It's when they don't go home and you have this chronic low-grade inflammation that really is, like I said, the root of all evil when it comes to chronic disease. And maybe that inflammation for you experience it in your joints, and it contributes to osteoarthritis or some other process. Maybe for me, maybe it's my skin. Maybe I experience eczema or psoriasis. Maybe for Janelle, it's heart disease or insulin resistance and diabetes. So we all have our weaknesses and how we respond to that inflammation, and whether we go towards maybe dementia or cancer or cardiovascular metabolic disease, right? So, but it comes back to that inflammation. And just like we said, the microbiome helps train that immune system, right? Educate our immune system while we're young and developing. It has a profound impact on how the body responds to these threats and can control the levels of inflammation in the body. And whether it's actual inflammatory happening inside the gut based off that microbial activity, or maybe it's the health of your gut lining. So whether there's inflammatory activity or not, our microbes and metabolites getting across that barrier that shouldn't, and then our immune system is seeing that reacting. There's all these different mechanisms that can trigger that chronic low-grade inflammation that you want to keep tabs on. And we've actually related all these activities to the conditions that people are most concerned with, right? Longevity, increasing health span. It's all the age right now. And it's really why our mission is early detection, early prevention. And we want to show people, hey, this isn't just activity that's isolated to the gut. Like what these microbes and what they're doing, this butyrate production, this sulfite gas production, it has an impact on your whole body. And we've been able to show that based on these activities, you have an increased risk for heart disease, for diabetes, for obesity, for chronic fatigue syndrome, for anxiety, right? And, while we can differentiate between IBS and IBD risk, and the good news is even based off those activities, we can see those and see that increased risk. But now, like we mentioned, we know how to get at it through nutrition.
Right.
So we can automatically identify the problem and provide the solution so we can minimize that risk while improving those pathways and improve your health. So really a comprehensive strategy so you can be utilizing food as medicine and your foundational diet that's personalized for you to help maintain your health over the long term.
Right. And one of the things that people need to remember is that the explanation you just gave us is why you can see somebody who like looks in shape and all of a sudden has a heart attack or has, something go wrong, right? It's
He's the healthiest person I knew.
Right.
You hear it all the time.
Yeah. And it's like, wow, I had no idea that and that person probably had no idea because they looked healthy. So they didn't go to the doctor as often and didn't do checkups and didn't take things as serious. But it's that underlying, like, oh, I didn't have weight gain. So I thought I was doing everything right. And I didn't realize I had to worry about what I ate because it didn't put weight on but it's the other stuff that's going on that hidden inflammation that's caused that a lot of times is like, wow, okay, I had a major life, or a major health scare, due to X, Y, and Z, and trace it back and go, oh, well, yeah, your gut was way off for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slow process, right? And that's why we're
Mhm.
trying to catch things early and
Yeah.
make those changes before it leads to the downstream, issues on your heart or turns into diabetes or things like
Mhm.
that.
Yep. And of course, the connection between what's going on at the gut and what happens in the brain, right? And the decades that it can take to lead to stuff that actually starts to show up, because your brain's great at being able to hide all that stuff and find other pathways to be able to use and be able to keep you going and all this until it finally reaches that tipping point where it's like, I can't do it anymore, right? And years and years and years of not doing the right stuff, and all of a sudden, all of that's not being done correctly at the gut level feeds over into the brain, and the brain starts to have problems.
Yeah, I mean, pick your organ, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
your brain, your lungs, your liver, your heart,
Yeah.
but it's usually around age 50 that we see, I don't want to say organ failure, but you see this where the first maybe chronic disease or first event that someone will experience. Yeah, whether it's that first diagnosis for diabetes, heart disease, right? That's around that tipping point that you refer to
Yeah.
is about that time. And how can we push that back? How can we push
Right.
that back to maybe age 60, maybe age 70 before we have
Yeah.
our first diagnosis? Uh, that's what we're all about. So we think that
Yeah.
early detection, prevention, testing, and certainly unlocking the microbiome for your own personal health are keys to that.
Yep. And that I think that's key to having a good quality of life later in life, right? Because
That's
the
right.
longevity piece is fine. Like in my wife's grandmother, I've heard her say this before. She's 95, and she's multiple times said, "Don't get old. It sucks getting old. It sucks getting." And I'm like, okay, well, you've had some health issues that have crept in. Like obviously, it sucks to not be healthy. It doesn't necessarily suck to not be old,
Right. Yeah,
right?
there's a different quality
There's a
of life
difference.
versus length of life, right? But I
Yeah.
think we're here aiming for that quality, and hopefully the length comes along with it. But
Right.
Life in the years, right?
yeah,
I say
Yeah.
life in the years, like years in the life.
Yep. Yep. So for somebody who is thinking about being, going through some testing and finding out more about like what's going on at their individual level, because I think one of the things that is very clear is that we need to look at our nutrition on an individual basis and not just say, you could probably get by with 90% of everything everybody says as far as what's healthy and all, but that extra 10 or 15 or 20% that's unique to you really makes the difference longer and later in life if you start doing it now. So how does somebody get in touch with Viome, get to follow along, and like what's the best way to do that?
sure. Yeah, you can visit our website, it's viome.com. And we offer two different types of tests. I'll talk a little bit about our full body intelligence test
Mhm.
because that's the most comprehensive. It's going to do a gut microbiome through a stool test. And that can sound a little bit intimidating to people, but it's so, so simple, right? It's a tiny amount that you
Yeah.
collect, and you do this all at home. A small blood test with a finger prick, and that's going to allow us to see your human gene expression,
Mhm.
and then some saliva for your oral microbiome. And why all three of those are so important is because we want to be able to see, hey, maybe there's signs of things going on in your gut, but are we now seeing that translated into your blood, right? Are we
Mm.
seeing those inflammatory signals and things like that going
Yeah.
on within your body? It's important to piece those together. And then that oral microbiome is really the next phase because that's not only our dental health, but what happens here, again, it easily gets through to our bloodstream. It
Mhm.
impacts our overall health, our heart health, our brain health. Those are connected to our oral microbiome.
Right.
So three little samples, you mail them back into us, you take a questionnaire on the app, and within a week or two, you get your results. Our lab processes that data. Our lab's actually here in Washington, And then we use AI and machine learning to be able to sift through, what signals are we seeing,
Right.
and what nutrients can we use to target it, and provide you those food recommendations to say, hey, these are the foods you should really focus on. These are your superfoods, right? We want
Right.
you to get these in if you can daily, as often as you can. But there's going to be a list of foods over here that we want you to either limit or try to avoid altogether.
Yeah.
As a dietitian, I'm always really careful to explain to people, avoid foods are not forever avoids. It's a temporary avoid.
Right.
My goal for all of our customers is to be able to eventually incorporate all of those foods back into your routine. Of
Right.
course, some will be more frequent than others, but sometimes it does take pulling some things out to be able to
Right.
settle that activity down in the gut and see improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're going to also provide you with some supplement recommendations as well, because um, it's hard to target with food alone. Food should always be the foundation, but if we
Right.
want to really take it up to that next level, targeting with some very specific nutrients that we can get in, higher quantities, higher doses through supplements can be beneficial.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and with the avoid thing, one of the things I always tell people is that, like, okay, if you want to have the piece of chocolate cake or the, whatever it is, like it's very rare that one meal is going to kill you, right? And like, unless you choke on it and nobody's there to do the Heimlich, like you're very unlikely to die from one meal. Will it? Will you have some maybe negative side effects from it, right? Like maybe you won't feel so great the next day, or
Low
you know,
energy. Yeah, something like
maybe
that.
your bathroom routine's going to be off for a day or two. Something like that may happen, but otherwise, like, okay, indulge yourself when you want to. It's like, but knowing how do I get myself back on track is the piece that I think is where a lot of people miss the boat in, and then that once in a while thing becomes everyday thing, becomes every meal thing, and then now it's way off track.
Yeah, don't let your cheat meal turn into a cheat day or a cheat weekend, right?
Right.
I think that's
Right.
really the trick. Back in my coaching days, I would always encourage my clients to track throughout the weekend, because
Mhm.
sometimes like Monday through Thursday, we're on it and we're meal
Right.
prepping, and then the weekend comes and it's like, hey, that's half of our week. We've got to pay
Yeah.
attention to what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw, and I don't know how accurate it is because again, it was on social media and it's an influencer that put it out, but over Thanksgiving week that said, you're going to eat double your week's worth of food in these 4 days of Thanksgiving weekend. Right. So like, be careful.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's probably true, but like, yeah,
Yeah. Let
it's
us get
knowing
one
those
day, not
things.
4 days.
Right.
The
Yeah.
So,
leftovers.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, well, is there anything that we didn't touch on that maybe you would say is important for people to know about when it comes to the gut microbiome and how everything works?
Um, well, we talked a lot about how that microbiome impacts the foods we react, and we talked about the banana, and you eat a banana, I eat a
Mhm.
banana, we have different reactions. In those food recommendations Janelle was talking about, we have our glycemic response model. We did one of the
Mm.
largest studies of its kind where we put continuous glucose monitors on about 1,000 people, a little over, gave them standardized meals. We did a bunch of testing on their microbiome and blood, and then we did this machine learned AI model that now
Mm.
someone tests with us, we can predict which foods they're most likely to respond to. That's one of the first,
Mm.
uh, I guess, set of recommendations that comes through that will go through the entire food list and say, hey, these foods are unlikely to, spike your blood sugar. These foods, you will have an unfavorable blood glucose spike. So let's
Right.
pull back on those foods, and automatically you've got that information, right? That self knowledge moving forward.
Yeah.
From there, we say, okay, well, which of these foods that you're not likely to have a glucose response to, or unfavorable glucose response, which are going to be the most beneficial for the activities in your microbiome, your scores, right? And then now we
Right.
bring forward, we give those recommendations, we give the descriptions of why, we give the evidence in the app with, the literature right there. If you want to go far down the rabbit hole as you want to,
Yeah.
it's all there. And the same thing for the supplements. Hey, here are the supplements that are the most beneficial for you. Here are the dosages. Here's the reasons why, and here's the evidence. That's all provided as well.
Right.
From there, you can say, hey, Viome, I'm good to go. I got my test results. I got my personalized food and supplement recommendations. You can go do your own thing and put together your own plan. If you continue to partner with us, we can actually formulate your supplements in real time. We have this like robotic compounding facility that we can take your formula, custom blend, direct control over the ingredients and the dosages. Put all your ingredients in there. We sonically mix it and encapsulate it, send it to your door in a 30-day supply. That with the personalized stick packs, with the biotics we were talking about, fibers, herbs are all in there depending on your needs and those activities. And then if you have some support you need in your oral microbiome, we really couldn't get at the oral microbiome and its activities with normal foods or supplements. One, supplements, they're in a capsule, so you're just completely bypassing. Yeah. There's no exchange there. Foods, it's really just while we're chewing and drinking. So you a very short interface. So like, hey, how can we get at these microbes and their activities? So we developed oral health lozenges, almost like a breath mint that you hold in your mouth, but we put prebiotics, same thing, herbs, postbiotics even, and polyphenols really to leverage, again, those activities to protect your tooth enamel, your gum health, inflammation, halitosis, bad breath. We're all built with those. We have personalized toothpaste as well. So depending on how your scores come out and where you need support, we can provide that. But and there's different plans you can put together based off your needs and
sure. Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, and that's looking at it's so much more than just the gut microbes, right? Like you mentioned, it's the oral health. It's everything that comes in interaction with the microbes that are a part of us, right? And making sure that they have a healthy life provides us a healthy life, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. Well, I want to thank you both for being guests. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.